Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to the weekly community Q&A where I will answer questions that either you have sent to me or came up in recent coaching calls that I had with clients. So we got 5 of them today, one offer, 2 leads, sales, and a results question. So we'll just kind of go through them in order. And so the first one is, how exact do the numbers need to be in my resume bullets, right? Since, again, for this person, since we really didn't track value at a deep level. And this comes up all the time, right? So if you've looked at the material on the resume, I always talk about how, being specific, adding numbers is much more valuable because it makes it much more real. And so the basic question here is, well, what if I didn't really track that stuff? Like I don't really have the information. What do I do? And what I would say is you can almost always get to some sort of quantification and it needs to be defensible, right? And this is the main thing in all of this stuff is the question is, will somebody else believe you? Right? So, don't make stuff up, don't lie. But if you're thinking through a process and it used to take on average, say 4 months, and you got it down to 2 weeks, you can say it went from 4 months to 2 weeks, or I should have done my math better, but like, basically 2 weeks out of 16 weeks. So it's 1/8. So it's whatever 1/8 is, 12%, something like that. So, improved it by 87.5%, right? That would be the reverse of that. Did you track it exactly at 4 months? Probably not. But are you confident? Like you were there. Like, is it 4 months? Do you believe yourself that it was 4 months? And do you believe yourself that it was 2 weeks? And again, don't make stuff up. But if you have a general sense of what it was, you can use that to create the numbers, right? Because the numbers are super important, right? It just makes it real. Hey, I made things better. Okay. Where, how, what? Like, do I believe you? Not really, right? But if you said, I improved the turnaround time for new security requests by 87%. That is a strong bullet because then they'll say, oh, how did you do that? Well, we used to have the process. It took us 4 months because we have to go through these 14 cycles. And we automated this, we did that, and now it only takes 2 weeks. That's an easy enough story, right? You didn't formally track it, but you did convey the value that you added. Right? And so that's the way you want to think about it. You always want to be specific. And again, for those of you who've listened to this for a long time, I mean specific, not detailed. Detailed is adding lots of stuff. Specific is just using numbers and specifiers that says this is a real scenario. Use a name. Don't say we talked to management. Who'd you talk to? Talk to the VP of engineering. That's better. I talked to Jane, the VP of engineering. Even better, right? The more specific you are, the more real it becomes, the stronger the story it is. But in general, figure out a way to get a number in there because there always is some way to calculate it, even if it's rough, like I just outlined in terms of timing. So that's the first one. Next question around leads, and this is a general one. So I'm not sure what my next career step is. Any suggestions on where to start? And so for most of you, in the community, we have a course in the leads course. There's a whole section on how do I figure out what I want to do next. But what I'd say for the purpose of this Q&A is there are basically two things you're focused on, and every career bounces back and forth between the two. So the first one is, what do I want? Right? So if you don't know what you want, you can't figure out how to get there, which is the second half. So you need to basically focus on finding what is out there. Right? And this is what we talk about with the networking. This is what we talk about just exploring. Like the easiest way is to find a job that you want, right? Sometimes you can kind of create your own job, particularly in new spaces. That is actually a little bit harder. The easiest way is go find out what 20 people in your space do at the next level and try to figure out which of those jobs do you want, right? Go talk to them because every job may sound interesting on the surface, but as you know, and I know, like jobs all have boring parts. Jobs all have things that are, just not as exciting as the other ones. So go talk to somebody in that job. And so if you're in that I don't know what I want mode, you should be interviewing, researching, going out there, figuring out what are some of the opportunities so that at least you have a few targets, right? You're like, okay, I might want to do this. Once you have that, the next question is, how do I get it? So if you're like, oh, I want to be a VP of engineering in this space, in this industry, how do I go get it? Now you're in sort of the execution mode and you're saying, okay, what are the skills? What are the experiences? What are all the things that I need to get that role? Right. And a simple example that I typically use is let's say you want to be CIO. You want to be all the way at the top. You want to run the whole technology organization. Right. And you are an engineer or a product person. Right. You say, okay, I've decided I want to be a CIO. I've talked to some of them. I think it's a really exciting job. I want that job. you have great experience in engineering, you've done a little bit of work at product. When you think about a CIO, they run the whole thing. So that starts with sort of product engineering architecture, but then also goes into infrastructure, ops, production support, those kind of things. And that ops area is something that's often missing. So again, if you're coming from engineering side, you want to be a CIO, and you know that, how do you get there? You need to find a way to get some experience in the operational side, where you actually are responsible for 24/7 support of X services for X clients, right? You need to do that as part of your next role. So now you know what your target is. You're trying to find a role that will get you exposure. I mean, sometimes you can do a full on, okay, go over here for 2 years, but sometimes you can find a job that also has a little bit of operational responsibility, right? But that's the idea. Like, so the first question is, where are you? Do you know what you want? Like, have a couple of targets in mind? If not, then you're in research mode. You're trying to figure out what the opportunities are. If you do know what you want, then you're in sort of execution mode. You're trying to figure out what the gaps are, and then you got to figure out a way to close the gaps. And then you basically bounce back and forth, right? So you pick a target, you figure out what your gaps are, you go execute, you close those gaps, and you get that job. And then you begin the research again. Okay, do I want to go to the next level? Right? Eventually, you don't. Right? For those of you who know my story, right? I was a chief operating officer of a technology group, so not of the company, of the technology group. And I decided I didn't want to do the next level, right? So, because the next level, because I was close enough, I watched it, I talked to all those people, and it's just one of those things you're on 24/7. Like, I was in the financial world, so there's a lot of regulatory and SEC scrutiny, and you might have to go in front of Congress, like all that kind of stuff. And I was like, that's not really what I want to do with the rest of my career. So I decided to stop and do something else, which is this. Right. But that's the idea, is every point you kind of evaluate what's your next target, you go get it, and eventually you'll probably figure out that this is high enough. I like what I'm doing, or I'm ready to take a left turn and go start my own business or do something totally different. Right. But that's the general idea, right? Do you know what you want? If not, go do that. If you do, figure out how to close the gap and go get it and just bounce back and forth. And that's basically what a career looks like. All right. Third one, this is more specific about how to get jobs. So, how important is networking given the current job climate? Incredibly important, right? And the current job climate is an unusual scenario. It's been this way for the past 9 months to a year, if not a little bit longer, but particularly the last 6 to 9 months has been lots of people hiring, but a ton of people looking. It's a supply problem with all the layoffs and people looking around and all the change. There is just a ton of people looking, which is very different than it was, say, 2 years ago. And so every job ends up having a couple hundred or even a couple thousand people applying, right? And it doesn't matter how amazing your candidacy is. If you are number 452 who applied, they're never going to see you, because they're going to find they're looking for 20 people to interview, maybe 30, right? And they're going to find that in the first 100, or at least in the first 200, but they're never going to get to 450, right? And so the way around that is the networking, right? You are looking for effectively a referral so that you can talk to somebody, right? Because the job market today, if you get to the interview stage, it's kind of like the classic, like it's been, for years, right? You get in the interview, you're talking, you're proving your value, you need to get through a few, and then you get the offer. The hard part is getting to the human being, right? Whether that's the hiring manager or the technical recruiter, the hard part is talking to them. And that's where just applying does work, but the percentages are much lower. You have a much higher percentage if you can network and get somebody to refer you. The other reason networking is super important, particularly for our community, which are people who are trying to get, right into the more senior executive roles, is often those roles have candidates before they're posted, right? So if you think about any jobs, like the day it's posted is not the first day. Like, they've been working on that for months, right? Maybe even longer, right? But like, it's been weeks and months of drafting it and going back and getting budget approval. Like, they've been thinking about this for a long time before it gets posted. And so what you want to think about is, how can I get in that process early? And that's where the networking comes in. Oh, you're hiring in this area, you're expanding, there's a new product line, they need these kind of resources. Oh, you would be great for this. Well, okay, when we post it, I'll let you know. Like, you're already in the queue. So it's a much higher chance of getting into the interview. So again, how important is networking? It has always been a best practice forever, right? But now it's becoming even more critical, right? It's becoming a necessity given the glut of applicants in this market. Now, hopefully things will stabilize over time, but at least at the moment, networking is one of the most critical things you can do in your job search. Okay, next question. And this is, sort of sales in the interview side. So how do I answer an interview question where I know the solution to a business problem, but I'm not sure that's how they would do it? So let me translate this question for you. So basically, this is the idea of, okay, how do you not come across as kind of a know-it-all? This is how I used to do it at at my old company, right? Because that's basically a turnoff for the interviewer. So I have a problem. If I'm interviewing you, I have a problem. That's why I'm interviewing. That's the only question I have in my head is, can you solve my problem? And the trick is, you may be able to solve my problem, but there are all these other things about things I've tried, things I haven't tried that you're taking a risk if you tell me how to solve my problem, right? And then you can come across as too prescriptive, not listening. So there's negatives that come along with that. Even if you're like, oh, I solved this exact problem. And so the way to answer that question is simply just to put those qualifiers on it, right? How would you solve this kind of problem, right? And you say, well, at my last company, this is how we did it. So just telling the story of how you solve this problem here is fine because you're talking about yourself in an experience. You can say exactly what you did. As part of the, again, executive interviews, you want to actually be talking about their problem, not your past problems, right? You want to be talking about, oh, so how does that relate to the problem that you guys are having? I saw this was on the job description. What is your challenge, right? You want to be talking about their problem, ideally. But the balance is you want to be talking about their problem without telling them what to do. And you can, again, one, you can say, this is what we did previously to solve a similar problem. You never say it's the exact same problem. You say it's a similar problem. Or you say some qualifier like, well, obviously I only have a limited amount of context, but what I'm hearing is A, B, and C. So in that case, I would do X. But obviously that may change if, G, H, and Y, whatever, right? Based on relationships, based on product cycle, based on whatever, right? You just put qualifiers. So don't be like, oh, I know how to solve that. All you do is you do this. Yeah, you'll be fine. Like, don't assume you can solve their problem because you don't know all the red flags, all the tripwires that they have internally, because every company has them. So the way to do it is to be prescriptive, but put those qualifiers in the front or the end. So I only have limited information. Well, based on what you've told me so far, my initial, suggestion would be to do this, right? So you're just qualifying a specific answer, saying, if this aligns to exactly what you're doing, this has been a solution. But understandably, there would need to be more, conversations or other things that may come up, right? So just put that qualifier around it. You still want to be able to show that you can solve a problem more directly. But again, just in this case, be careful not to be too prescriptive because you can basically hit a tripwire, right? You could say, oh, all you do is you work the product, you had this feature, and you do this and that, and then you're all set. It turns out they already tried that and it failed because of X, Y, and Z. You didn't know that, right? Those are the tripwires that you don't want to hit. So just put the qualifiers around it, and usually it is a fine answer. Okay, last question. This is around results. So once you're in the job, right? And this is a scenario, okay, I only have infrequent meetings with my boss. How do I get them to see the value that I'm adding? I'm actually seeing this more and more, right? Where people don't necessarily have, and this is true kind of higher up you go, don't necessarily have regular one-on-ones with your boss. So how do you kind of continue to show them your progress? And so there are two things I would suggest in this case, or two ideas. So one is you want to pick a cadence where you're just going to kind of summarize what's going on, right? And it could be a monthly report, it could be a quarterly check-in, it could be something that you can write down. Often you can just do it as an email, right? And just say, hey, it's and again, you don't have to make it something formal. You can be like, oh, it's the end of Q2, right? I was doing some reflections with the team. Here's what we kind of summarized. I wanted to share it with you, right? So you don't have to tell them like, I'm doing this because you don't really pay attention to me, right? You don't say that. You can kind of put it together in a way that says, hey, we did a Q2 retrospective, highlighting the key things that we accomplished, the focus areas for Q3, and I did it for the team, and I'm sharing it with you, right? That's one way just to get the visibility. So you need to have something. If there's no kind of regular cadence, you need to have something that creates that, oh, and I've been working and our team's been doing really good stuff. So you want that. And try not to wait to the annual. Oftentimes, oh, it's the annual review, right? Oh, can you send me what you've done this year? Oftentimes you get that request from your boss. Don't wait for the end. Do it, I would say, at least quarterly. And that way you can be like, oh, sure, I'll just send you those quarterly updates that I did for you to kind of remind him or her that you've been doing it. The second one is this idea of cumulative, right? And so the other benefit to doing something like a quarterly is if you're like, hey, we celebrated this last Friday. Hey, we celebrated this 2 weeks ago. Hey, like if you're sending one-off kind of achievements, they just get lost in the ether, right? Anything over 3 months ago, nobody really remembers. If it was big enough, they do, but oftentimes a lot of stuff goes. So that's why doing it cumulative, meaning having some sort of, again, quarterly or just kind of running list for the year that says, don't forget, in January, we had these 3 wins. Because I guarantee you, basically, everybody forgot about that, right? So it's up to you to kind of remind them that it's been a steady progress of achievements, not just the last couple months, right? So again, come up with something structured if you don't have a regular meeting and make it kind of cumulative, right? So it's showing more and more and more as you go throughout the year to remind them of those things that dropped off the radar from a few months ago. Okay, so that is what we got this week. Again, look forward to seeing everybody in the community. As always, drop your questions in this post or just send me a DM and I will do them next week. All right, have a great week, everybody.